everyone. I'm Stephanie Hawkins. I am our event director for Game Developers Conference. I have been in this role for almost 2 years now and really enjoyed getting to see GDC in person.
Hey, my name is Brian Francis. I'm a senior editor at GameDeveloper.com. At GDC Showcase, I help run some of the fireside chats. And as you probably noticed during the show, I, helped host the event on camera here, painting minis.
So what goes into showcasing a digital event like this?
Last year for Game Developers Conference GDC, we had a hybrid event. For that, for 2020, 2021, we had virtual events. And before that, of course, we had in-person. So 2022, we did a hybrid event, and we found that it was hard for on attendees and on staff to put on both events at the same time. We felt like it wasn't that GDC experience that we wanted everyone to have. So for 2023, we made the decision to have our in-person event in March and then our second virtual event in the summer. And it was nice that we could fully dedicate all of our time and resources to the virtual event, to GDC Showcase. So it was really nice to see the community come together in the summertime as well as in the spring. I should say in March and June, because depending on where you live, it could be the opposite.
Yeah.
The GDC team has been putting on virtual events since the pandemic, and I was formerly on the GDC team, transitioned full-time over to Game Developer shortly after we got the vaccines. What I was going to say was that the team has been building on experience from those pandemic era events for Showcase this year. I sort of watched them pull a lot of the old tools out of the toolbox from the online only events that got us, through those dark times. So I think there's a lot of foundational stuff there from when, we couldn't gather in person. And I think something about what this year's Showcase showed is that even though in-person events are back, there are still these ways of interacting and ways of learning and ways of networking that we built in the pandemic that people still connected with. So watching everything from the platform we were operating on to the session formats to how we were doing the fireside chats, I sort of watched, it was great to watch the team have the freedom to go, we learned, we had all these lessons. We don't have to try and reinvent the wheel. We can rebuild what was working for us, that we learned in dire straits.
Now, in before the pandemic, GDC was an in-person event. Was this something that you guys always wanted to do, like a digital version of the event as well? Or was that something completely born out of the pandemic?
We've always had our vault. And so that was always, to be honest, ahead of its time as far as an archive of over 20 years of GDC sessions. And so for people who weren't able to attend, they were able to still see a vast majority of GDC content. I say vast majority. The only thing that we don't record at GDC is the roundtable sessions. Those we really do want that robust conversation and no one being afraid of it being recorded. And those roundtables we actually brought to GDC Showcase this year. And so those were on Thursday. We just had roundtable discussions. Again, those were not recorded. So that's something that we've taken from in-person and brought over to the virtual event as well.
Stephanie, were you, I forget because the pandemic wiped my memory in many ways. Were you on the GDC team back in 2019?
Not on 2019. I was with the company, just not on GDC. But I did come over in 2020 for that first virtual event. So,
yeah, and that first attempt at a GDC in 2020.
Like Brian said, we've learned a lot since then.
Yeah, I was going to say, your question was kind of like, have we been thinking about this since before the pandemic? And the answer is, as a former member of the GDC team, is that what I remember is that there were a lot of conversations about different kinds of GDC, like different ways that GDC could continue to spread out to the game development community. I think if you look back at the history of the show, you'll see stuff like VRDC or GDC Europe or GDC Online as different experiments and runs of the show and its format, in an international network. I can't speak for lots of people who, even in some cases, sadly, just, have moved on since then, about what they were thinking about with virtual events, but I think it's very accurate to say the pandemic just put all these things we've been trying and talking about and discussing and ways of, connecting with game developers in an online way. It just said, okay, it's go time. There's no other option. Put everything else aside and start working on this right now.
There's been so much good that has come from the virtual events that we've learned. So immediately in 2020, we determined that closed captioning was really important to us. And so we actually had a person that was closed captioning all of our sessions. Not a person, I guess it was a team of people. And that is something that we've continued even post-pandemic. So last year, all of our sessions had closed captioning within Vault. And then again, we've continued that this year. So we're going to continue that. And then we also closed caption in, so it's English, Spanish, Japanese, and Mandarin to hit our core audiences. And then we also have heard such positive feedback from so many attendees that aren't able to attend GDC in person. My favorite story is Stephen Spahn, who won our Ambassador Award last year. When I was talking to him in our prep calls, he mentioned that he had always wanted to attend GDC, but had never been able to because he couldn't travel. And so our virtual events were the first time he was actually able to attend and get a taste of GDC. And then thankfully last year he was able to travel across the country for GDC to accept his award. But it was really great to hear that feedback that there is a place for these virtual events within the industry. And the more we do, the more we're learning and changing the format based on what our audience wants.
No, absolutely. I mean, I think Josh Shore mentioned it's very expensive at any convention, not just GDC, to like fly in, get a hotel, be there for 3 days, and not everyone has that budget for the company, or they may be an indie dev. So like that's what these virtual events that are popping up really do apply worldwide internationally, and all you have to do is have an internet connection and a computer, and that's much more accessible than a plane flight and a hotel in one of the most expensive cities on the West Coast. Now GDC is a big show, and obviously that means you have a big budget. You mentioned closed caption. I used to work in closed captioning and post-production. That is very expensive. What kind of budget do you get for a virtual showcase? Is it on par with like the in-person stuff? Is it smaller, and how do you make that budget go as far as you can?
We have a great team. That is really, our operations team is really great about stretching our budget depending on what we have going on. So every May, the GDC team comes together for a strategy session, and we determine our priorities for the next year. Of course, that changes throughout the year depending on how the industry changes. But at that point, we set our priorities and our budgets accordingly. So the closed captioning is always included in there. Virtual events are always included in there. And then we just kind of divide the pie.
What are the challenges when getting, because obviously you have a physical in-person show that developers go to, and like obviously but you want big names to come to the show, right? So is it difficult if someone comes to GDC in person and then you try to get them to the virtual event, they're like, oh, it was just at GDC, or just how is it booking talents and game devs in general to come onto your show?
So this year, we actually had several speakers that at the last minute weren't able to travel to GDC for a variety of reasons. And the great part was we could tell them, hey, we have this event coming up in June. Would you be interested in speaking there? So they'd already gone through the whole review board process. They'd already been vetted as speakers. We already had all the materials. And so it was great that we could just say, hey, come speak to it with us in June. So that worked out extremely well. I've gotten feedback that next year that a lot of people would like to have a call for papers. So that's definitely something that we're looking at adding as well.
I think something that's really cool about the way GDC works, both for showcase and in person, is that it's funny you use the phrase booking, and certainly there is some talent booking at events like this. Stephanie may know exactly who like needs that kind of arrangement, but because of the since for the long of the show's history, from back in the show's origins, this show has been about developers getting together, consulting with other developers to figure out what are the best presentations to be made here. I think it's worth pointing out that when it comes to any of the GDC events in the show's history, is that these are very authentic, organic attempts to bring people together. And when it comes to the talent on display, I think there's less of a priority. Big names are great, and certainly everyone on the team gets so excited when we hear that something like the in-person GDC this year, the Kirby, the presentation on the development of the most recent Kirby game.
That was huge. I remember that was huge. Everybody was talking the show. Yeah.
Incredible when something like that comes through, but it's worth spotlighting that these events live and die on what our community wants to share each other, and game developers are some of the most desperate to break open their toolbox and go, look at everything I made for my game. And that's what makes it, to your question about whether it's difficult or not to book big talent, is almost booking big talent is almost, Stephanie can speak to how high of a concern it is, but I think watching the team work throughout the year and my own experience on the team is that supporting that organic engagement is very, very central to the whole process. And I think I'm gonna get a little self-aware here at the moment and say it sounds like I'm trying to sort of use this word organic in an inorganic way, but like I really want to hype up how much the content team and all the affiliated teams are like really riding on the wave of the world of game development and its energy for sharing knowledge and for connecting and communicating. Like in some ways, yeah, people want to show up and they want to see some of the big famous people, but like I remember going to GDC in person this year and this person saying, oh, my biggest hope this year is I want to see this, I mean, it's Sam Barlow is who they said, so mildly big name, but not like Hideo Kojima or
Todd Howard or something.
Yeah, they want to meet, like their idols are each other. Their idols are their people making games with each other, and I think that matters as much, if not more, than the big talent, the big names.
And the greatest part about GDC Showcase, in my opinion, is that the speakers are right there in either live answering questions, or if not live, they're within the chat as you're watching the session.
Yeah.
And so they're answering questions in real time, which is amazing, because at GDC, you have to hold your question until the end, but at Showcase, you can ask it in real time and get those answers. So it's really fun to see the speakers interacting with the audience.
I want to follow up on what Stephanie said with so in 2020 I was the one who had to like cobble together a Twitch stream to stream GDC talks that we speakers chose to pre-record and then send in after we the postponement of GDC 2020. Well, first postponement, then conversion to then GDC summer. The thing that we did not expect at the time was that speakers interacting in chat was going to be this like as powerful an experience as it was. There was like I'm very interested in experience wise, like kind of meta levels of communication, like being able to have a presentation which is like this very effective lecture, and then having live commentary from and Q&A taking from someone through text during the time. I'm getting a little personal with this, but I've always loved, like when I was a kid, there would be books, fiction that uses like, footnotes. I think in a strange way, Showcase is like the only show that I know of that uses to be able to communicate through text while video is playing. And that's really something that Showcase does that in person can't, because the person's on stage doing the talk.
Yeah, GDC, you guys have there's a huge wall like in between the main halls that tells you all the talks that are happening. It's a gigantic wall. Now, is it difficult when you're working with a Showcase to organize that like more effectively, or like make decisions of we only have this much time, like who do we let in, who wants to speak, okay, how can we fit them in? Like talk about the process of organizing all the content that you have in your Showcase. Ashley
and the content team and the rest of the people in the content team literally describe it as like, I'm going to go in a dark corner and like schedule, like I'm not coming out, don't bother me, I'm going to move, get everything in the schedule. And so they take like this large bucket of hour long approximately formats and just they get it all to work. And it is a dark science that they have mastered, and it somehow makes it every year like there's just this very functional arrangement of all the talks. So I think just letting it speak to how they have to like dedicate so much time and effort to it is I think the best answer to that question.
So at GDC, you've got over 20 tracks going at any one time. For GDC Showcase, we have one track going at a time, so one session at a time. So we have more of that community feel. Everyone's in this together. The exception is our roundtables. We did have multiple roundtables offered at each time period. So for a Showcase, it's a little different. It's not as many sessions, but it's a lot more intentional about what sessions we do offer at Showcase.
Something I should have mentioned also was that Showcase is designed around all the time zones it operates in. So there's a concerted effort to like put specific things in as accessible a time zone as possible, so that as few people as possible are watching at like 3 a.m.
We do have our networking for GDC Showcase is like a huge part of it. I think that's a lot of people's favorite part about the event. So we do have a session in the morning for Pacific time zone, which is great for our European audiences. And then we also have a session in the afternoon, which is great for our Asian audiences. So we do as Brian said, we do take that into account. And then everything is available on demand. So if you are in a time zone where it doesn't make sense to watch a session, you can watch it within, sometimes it's within minutes, sometimes it's within a day, the sessions that you missed within Showcase.
What would you say is the biggest misconception from an outsider looking in about a digital live event like you guys have hosted? What's like the big takeaway you want to give to somebody who has no idea how this works and be like, may not understand what's involved in doing something to this scale?
It's an event. I mean, all of our events are take a lot of time and energy. It's definitely a labor of love. I would say the same for GDC Showcase. The hardest part on my end is that I can't see my team. We're messaging. I can, regularly touching base, but it's not the same as, when you're in person and you're running around together. But I do think it's really great that we can still bring the community together and everyone can still interact and have that touch point in the mid part of the year.
I have two answers to your question, which is one, I think the biggest misconception people can have about a virtual event is that sometimes I worry that people feel that virtual events can be this passive experience. And thankfully, like in the video game community, you have like this jumping off point of, oh, well, things at your computer can be like engaging and interactive because it's literally the whole point of the profession. So, but even, it gets very comparable to like Twitch streams, like the energy and activity of watching your favorite streamer, except like much more, a mix of professional, educational, like professional networking, like that interactivity always feels front and center. The thing that has made me very passionate about learning about game development is that, learning games are hard to make is just as true for running events. And it's been fascinating to watch like the unique ways that event production translates into online event production, and how like if someone was like, oh, like everything should just be like live streamed on the world around all the time, like it's like that is actually not just push a button and that happens. There is so much very smart, very hard work put in to make things that seem as easy as the push of a button seem that easy.
And the last question I have is, with the success of this showcase, is this something we can expect every year, much like before the pandemic, much like every year we could depend on GDC to always be open? Is this something that will happen every year, or is it going to be like on a per year basis based on previous years?
We're starting to make our 3-year plan right now. So if anyone has feedback on GDC Showcase, please send it my way. We're taking all feedback and taking it into account as we're making our strategy.
I have less power to answer that question than Stephanie does, so I think the best thing I can say is that I feel like the team is very captivated by the fact that game developers want to connect more frequently throughout the year, and that going to GDC in March feels so good, and being able to spread that out in other locations, or digital or physical. People want it, and I would love it if it happened myself, because I like getting that opportunity to visit these things and connect with our audience. So I'm going to that's my very vague answer to back up what Stephanie said.
And then where can people go to find out more information about, like, either last year's showcase or future showcases, or stay up to date with your news and blurbs and stuff? Website, Discord, forum?
Yeah, so our website, gdconf.com, is a great place to go for all GDC information. All of our updates are there. And then the GDC Showcase platform is actually open through this Friday. So if anyone wants to check it out, you can. And then all of those sessions will be added to GDC Vault. So another good place to look for GDC updates as well.